everyone, welcome back. I'm Morgan Reynolds with Beyond the Trend, and this is Coffee, Cocktails, and Capitalism. Today, we're starting off a little bit differently. We actually filmed a full, rather lengthy and wide-ranging discussion with our guest here, good friend Lance Lunceford. And because of the holidays and timing and travel and things like that, that episode was banked until now. However, in the last couple of months, a lot of exciting things have been happening, not only in Lance's work/volunteer/personal doings here in Vero, but also some of the topics that we discussed have some important updates. So we felt like it was maybe appropriate to do something a little bit different and film a quick update. So we're putting this before the conversation that we filmed back in November. So if you want to see what's changed or what we're talking about in this first little segment, it's because we're referencing what's in the conversation after this part. So watch this so you are in all the hot news, and then go back and watch the full conversation, which I found very enjoyable.
Likewise, Morgan.
All right. So, Lance, let's start with your kind of volunteer roles in the community have been updated a little bit in the last couple of months. What's going on?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Morgan, I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening to us today. Lance Lunceford, and actually I was reelected president of the Taxpayers Association about a month after we spoke, but also I now serve as the chairman of the Economic Development Council. I know we spent a lot of this episode talking about the state of jobs and opportunities here in Indian River County, and I was speaking through the lens of being a member of that body. We were just in the middle of getting to the finish line with the Treasured Tomorrow strategic plan. That plan has now been adopted by both the EDC and the Board of County Commissioners. It is policy here in Indian River County. That's a major update. Also want to talk a little about the initiatives we're working on here. So we're in the process of revising our local job grants program. We're in the process of focusing on workforce development, ways to expand the capacity of our county to retrain people into good paying jobs here in the region. A lot of exciting initiatives, but we felt it was important because this is a major update since the last time we spoke. The other thing I think we should mention is property taxes. We've certainly seen a set of updates with that discussion. I think when we spoke past, the legislature hadn't even had a specific bill on the topic. So since now, we really have a lot of changes. Yeah, which is a
very hotly debated topic in our community. And I think one of the reasons it's kind of cool that we have a little bit of the before and after conversation packaged here is that since Lance and I sat down originally, there's been several community, what would you call it? Like a public debate, forums, town halls kind of thing to talk about. And correct me if I'm wrong. So from a layman's point of view, the issue with the property tax is that the state government in Tallahassee is talking about getting rid of property taxes in Florida, with still a carve out that helps to cover school, whatever the school budget is that's normally allocated from property taxes, that would remain. And there would also be some other exceptions. But if you're a full-time resident in your home, no additional property taxes. And from a state perspective, they feel that that makes sense and is doable and works within the budget. At a local level, many of the local municipalities and counties are very concerned about what that would do to local public services. Is that about right?
That's about right.
Okay.
And you know, we spoke about many topics last time, but these are the two really that have been updated. So we felt it was important to give you, the viewer, really an important set of information on what has changed since then. Now, the most likely proposal to pass is something called House Joint Resolution 203. Currently, the House of Representatives here in the Florida legislature has passed that. The Senate has not even taken up any action on that issue. And just to clarify, what this property tax reform means is that if both chambers agree on something, it'll then go on the ballot for the voters to decide. So currently, we're still early in the process, but the difference between where we are now and where we spoke last is we actually have a proposal on the table. What does that do? I like to think of it in two buckets. First and foremost, for those who have homesteaded properties, you're still going to be paying property taxes to the school systems. But if you're a homesteaded property, the legislation that's currently been proposed, you will not pay any property taxes on anything else except for your school taxes if you're homestead. If you're non-homestead, you're still paying property taxes on everything. And quite honestly, you're eligible for property tax increases or decreases the same way that we are now. So I think it's important to understand a lot of individuals are going across the state claiming that property taxes are going to be eliminated. And I just don't think that's the most genuine way of articulating what this proposal is. My concern is not so much a reaction that is negative. It's so much I want to make sure that if we're going to reduce taxes, we actually do it in the way we're reducing spending. I think that if you're shifting taxation, it's really not reducing taxes. Again, the worry I have is that we're going to shift the cost from property taxes onto charging for services, everything from utilities to impact fees for businesses who want to build things. There's potentially been the idea of a sales tax or, Lord forbid, an income tax proposed to kind of plug the revenue. Certainly none of us want that.
Gasp.
So, again, I want to make it very clear. The Taxpayers Association, we always are looking for ways to cut taxes locally and make sure that spending is as low as possible. But really, the state legislation is kind of curtailing local regions' ability to decide what kind of community they want to have. And this is important, Morgan, because the reason why there's a lot of concerns, there are certain local governments across the state that are being extremely excessive with taxpayer funds. But here in Indian River County, look, we got our issues, we got our squabbles here and there, but we're a very conservative county. We have the 6th lowest general fund millage rate. Spending in our county government over a 20-year period, taking all combined spending, isn't even at the rate of inflation. So again, we're very lean here. I worry about the fact that, counties like ours that have been so conservative, we're kind of being penalized for our prudence because we're basically being held in the same bucket as those counties that are wasteful with taxpayer dollars. So, I'd just like to see a proposal that is reasonable, that doesn't, cause some type of new angst. And I really think, again, if we want to rein in local government spending, the citizens in those communities need to step up, need to get involved, and need to encourage change. If you're in a conservative county, then I think you got to protect your services. You got to make sure that certainly your police, your fire rescue, your infrastructure is taken care of. And then after that, you get to decide how much or how little you want to spend. That's the way the good governance should be, and that's really what I want to see.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And if people want to read a little bit more about this proposed bill or get more recent updates, where are the best places for them to look?
Absolutely. I would recommend 2 things. First and foremost, it may be arduous, but looking up the actual legislation itself is so important. If you Google House Resolution 203, if you Google property taxes in Florida, you're going to find the legislation. But number 2, I definitely want to give Let's Talk Vero credit. They've hosted 2 forums, and I had the privilege of joining our county commission chairman, Darrell Lohr, our Vero Beach mayor, John Catugno, our Vero Beach city manager, Monty Falls, for a very important discussion on this topic. We actually did 2 discussions. And then I want to shout out my own team at the Taxpayers Association. The Taxpayers Association set up also another forum with County Commissioner Susan Adams, who actually serves as the first vice president for the entire Florida Association of Counties, as well as our property appraiser, Wesley Davis, who, as we found out, also is the first vice president of the Property Appraisers Association. So 2 figures in our community who really know what they're talking about when it comes to local government and the nuances of how you make these decisions. And I got to tell you, I think the key thing from everyone is just the uncertainty. There's a certainty in the legislation, and it's saying we're going to eliminate those portion of taxes, but there's no guidance on how we're going to fill the revenue or what to cut. There's mandates on what has to sort of stay the same, but there's no real guidance to say, hey, you can cut this, you can't cut this. And so again, Morgan, if I'm going to tell you what you got to do, and I don't offer you a plan or a solution, you really shouldn't listen to me. And also, one final point. This is where I will make a little bit of an attack. I think it is a little bit hypocritical for the state to be pushing this when they did not even manage to pass a budget in their legislative session. Every local government across the state has to pass a budget. They're going to pass a budget because they're required to pass a budget, but in the regular session, famously this year, that's the one thing that they're required to do, and they didn't do it. So again, I think it begs a question. You're going to lecture all these governments, some of whom are irresponsible and need to be reined in, but also you're lecturing many others who are responsible and do the right thing and keep taxes low. You're going to lecture them on how to govern their own cities and their own counties when you're not even able to pass a budget. I think that's a bit hypocritical.
That's fair. I mean, people need to go and examine the facts and kind of understand maybe a little bit better how their local and their state government works.
Precisely.
I think it's easy for us to be hands off and then frustrated with the outcome. And it does take time and legwork to kind of do the investigation, but maybe worth it in this case because this hits really close to home for a lot of people. Lance, when can we expect that there would actually be a vote on this? What's the soonest? Would it happen November, normal election time, or when would that happen?
Yeah, so if both chambers pass a resolution, then it's going to be on the November ballot. The key is both chambers have to pass it. And again, I want to make this very clear. This is a very volatile situation. The Senate could propose a totally different piece of legislation. The House could compromise their proposal. They could amend it. Or to be honest with you, there's a possibility the Senate doesn't even take it up. We really don't know. We're in that process right now of seeing the legislature negotiate this. So there's really a lot of uncertainty in the process. But if they both pass something, you're going to see it on the November ballot. That is correct.
Okay. And then my last question was about the job grants that you were talking about. Yes. Can you just super briefly explain what that is and where people can go for more information?
Absolutely. So I want to be a bit careful because the Sunshine Law prohibits me from giving my opinion on a matter of voting before the Economic Development Council, but I will say the job grants program is under consideration for revision, and that will come before the Economic Development Council on our May 19th, 2026 meeting. Okay. It's the third Tuesday of May in County Building B at 3:30. We're going to have a discussion on that topic. It is on the agenda. And so again, the Economic Development Council submits advice and direction to the Board of County Commissioners, which is our elected commission for the county. And the county commission, of course, votes and takes action and is responsible for governing our region. So that's sort of how all those play together. Again, it's really the most I can say, just the fact that it's going to come on the discussion. It's going to be on the agenda on May 19th. And certainly I welcome anyone to give me their feedback or any other member of the EDC their feedback on this important item of public policy.
Neatly done.
I try.
But again, kind of in layman's terms, this is a program where there are incentives for businesses to come and create jobs here in Indian River County.
Yes, it's the existing program, it's a one-time grant for new jobs created. So a very important point here. It is not corporate welfare where you're subsidizing jobs over numerous periods of time. It is if you're a business coming to our county or if you're here in Indian River County, this is a grant for new jobs that you create. It's a grant per job. So currently in the current program that is under revision, there's a $3,000, a $5,000, and a $7,000 grant amount per job based off of whether it is 75 to 100% of the median wage in our county, whether it is 100% to 125% of the median wage in our county. So again, whether it falls in that threshold, you'll get a grant per job created. It is one time though. Again, that is under revision. So again, when May 19th comes, there'll be a discussion about how we want to or if we want to amend the program. But that is the current state of where it's at. And it was designed really to foster jobs and really to incentivize local businesses and businesses coming into the region to create jobs for the community. And you may ask, well, what's the point of this, Lance? Well, think about it this way. If you have a company coming here and they're investing in new jobs, they're putting up money to invest in our community because they're investing in people by building jobs. A grant to cover a portion of that cost is a huge return on investment because it's only a portion of the job getting created that's getting a grant from taxpayer funds. And so you're getting the benefits of people coming into the community or people here in the community having access to better jobs and really being able to afford to live here and afford all of the things that really constitute the American dream. So I see it as a good program. I see it as good policy. Certainly looking forward to any potential revisions that the EDC does or doesn't consider at that meeting. It's an important topic and we got to tackle it.
That's excellent. I think a lot of people don't even know how many items like this are in constant consideration and revision at the county level. Sometimes I think the city meetings, the city council meetings kind of get all the glory, or at least in the circles I run in, people are always like, oh, did you see what happened at Tuesday's meeting? When can people visit or tune into the county commission meetings? Absolutely.
So county commission meetings, you can see it while it's happening. A lot of the other advisory boards and committees, you'll have to wait for a recording, but the meetings themselves are open to the public. I encourage people to attend, and there is a very seamless calendar, both at the City of Vero Beach for all of their committees and at the Indian River County website for their committees and all the boards that meet. I encourage anyone interested to go and look at those and really just make sure they're in touch with the topics that they're interested in, the topics that they're passionate about. out. Again, I will be honest with you. There's some people who probably don't want to see the public come in. I always love it when I see people come to our EDC meetings. I love meeting people. You get, more people and more ideas are always better than less people and less ideas. And so I love it when I see people. We actually just had a special meeting of the EDC on workforce development yesterday, and there were so many people who came out, so many business leaders, so many citizens who just really want to understand the state of workforce development in our county. So that's an example of how it just makes me smile to see people who really care about their community and want to leave it a better place than they found it. So if you're one of those people, make sure you're up to date on all the various meetings happening. And certainly, at least I can speak just for the EDC, the Economic Development Council, we're always welcome to have you. We're always glad to see you come to our meetings.
Awesome. That is a great update, Lance.
Thank you, Morgan.
So lots of things happening in the county, lots of things happening in the city. Go to the websites, do some Googling, stay informed, and come and speak about what your opinions are, because, the county belongs to all of us, and it's important for everybody to weigh in as we go through this process. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned for the full conversation. Let's get to know Lance a little bit better and talk about a broader range of topics and how they affect coffee, cocktails, and capitalism. Thanks, everybody. See you soon. Welcome back to Coffee, Cocktails, and Capitalism. I'm Morgan Reynolds with Beyond the Trend, and thank you so much for joining us. Today, we were sung into a very special podcast. This is the first episode of Coffee, Cocktails, and Capitalism that we are filming in our new studio. We were very fortunate to find a really great new office location. So if you are a guest anytime soon, you'll be able to come see it. But breaking it in, christening the studio, as it were, today is a friend, a fellow advocate for good things here in town that I really enjoy, Lance Lunceford. Lance, welcome.
Thank you, Morgan. I appreciate it. And for everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully we can brighten up your day, your evening, wherever you're listening at this from. But I just want to thank you so much for having me. And like I said, the office looks great. We got a old fashioned right here. It's no better way to spend an afternoon here in Vero Beach, Florida.
It's so true. So make yourself a little beverage and join us. And again, thank you to Keaton at 21st Amendment. You specially requested him.
I did.
You said that is the man who makes the best old fashioned for me.
You are accurate on that. So I am not the biggest drinker. I really don't drink that often. I think the last time I've had an alcoholic beverage probably close to a month ago at a function. I really only drink when I'm with friends or if the function demands it, occasionally for business, but usually I prefer something like water or tea there. But if I am going to do something, my go-to drink is an old fashioned, and I got to tell you, maybe just because I'm loyal, I love 21st Amendment's old fashioned. Keaton's great, makes amazing. We actually did something special today. He will explain it better than I could possibly, but there's a more cherry in this old fashioned that we're drinking, so it's a wonderful testament to their craft. Jeff, the owner of 21st, is a good friend and actually a colleague on my Taxpayers Association board. So really, I have a special fondness for 21st Amendment and what they're able to do. They're very involved in the community. And so I love it. It's a great place to grab an old fashioned. And it's one of the few places where I actually honestly grab a drink. When the occasion is appropriate.
When it's appropriate.
Yes.
That's right. And it's appropriate now. So you lean back and enjoy. Lance, I was trying to think as you were coming over here where we first met or how we got introduced to each other. Do you remember?
I remember. Okay, so there's two conversations I remember. The first was in your old office. After a Main Street, it was towards the end of one of the Downtown Fridays, and so everyone was coming in. I think I had helped bring a banner over from John Catugno had to run, and so he needs some help just carrying a banner. So he brought his stuff to the car, I brought over, and then we just had like a 30-minute conversation. And then the second one was a coffee at the Vero Wine Bar, which is a great thing to say, coffee at the Vero Wine Bar.
Oh, that's so fun.
Again, my dedication to not drinking extends that I get coffee at the Vero Wine Bar. So
also I think it was maybe 2 p.m.
That's true.
We were not ready to be fully done with the date.
That is accurate.
But yes. Also, everybody go visit the Vero Wine Bar. Shout out to them. I think though that maybe I first met you at Marine Bank was having some type of president's luncheon, maybe. Do you remember that?
Yes, that is true. Okay, so I was thinking, my brain went to when did we have our first like Lance and Morgan chit chat about like what we're doing in the community. Where we probably met, like rubbed shoulders or first met at a function was, I remember that Bill Penny, the big table they have over the second floor when he has a luncheon. Yes, I remember that. That was fun. Laura Moss was there. I remember that because it was right in the middle of when there was a height debate, and so I remember that came up at that discussion. Carolyn was there. Carolyn, our of all people, our the vice chair for the Taxpayers Association.
Oh, is that Carolyn McAvoy?
Yes.
I just went to her luncheon for the first time on Tuesday.
Yes.
She made me the keeper of the bell because it was my first time. So yeah, and then I also had to wear the sticker and everything.
Yes. Yeah, you and Mark Litton did a fantastic job
keeping the time. They put us to work there. So yes, Lance, I know that you wear multiple hats, and I kind of want to talk about a bunch of them. But we like to kind of give people who are watching a little bit of background on our guests who may not know you as well as the rest of us. So let's start at the beginning. Where were you born and raised?
Right here in Vero Beach, Florida, and it gets even better than that. My mom determined the name Lance, and I can't make this up, having lunch at Ocean Grill and seeing the Lance cracker because they had crackers.
What?
Yep, literally. And so
called Lance the crackers?
No, like Lance crackers. The have you ever had a Lance cracker before?
I don't think I've ever.
Oh my gosh.
Noticed.
There's a popular, I don't know how to describe it. There's a popular brand of crackers called Lance crackers. I promise you I'm not making this up.
Well, now I'm going to have to look the next time that I'm there.
You really should.
That's hilarious.
No, so it gets even better. No, but my dad, mom came down here. Mom was born here. Dad effectively was born and raised here. He was born in technically Western Kentucky, but grandfather was one of the first really active band directors here at Vero Beach High School in the 60s. So, if you talk to the pioneer families, they're very young, but if you talk to a lot of people in town, we've been here for a pretty good time. I was born in 1999, went to First Baptist Church, grew up here. Like many people, I think growing up here, you always think, well, this is kind of maybe a stepping stone to greener pastures when you ascend professionally. But I think when you spend time away from here, I did when I went to college and university, I think I really gained appreciation for Vero Beach being away. So went to University of Pennsylvania, Warton School, studied finance and management, minor in music. I come from a family of musicians, so it's a big, important part of my life.
What is your music specialty?
Trombone and conducting. So my dad was actually trained by one of the best wind band conductors in the country. And so when I was a trombonist in middle school, late middle school, late high school, he taught me conducting because every brass player who gets to a certain point of skill is always tempted to learn other brass instruments. So if you're a trumpet player and you get really good, you may want to learn French horn, or you may want to learn baritone. But if you do that, you learn different habits because every brass instrument has a different mouthpiece. So to be good on one, you have to learn distinct habits for that instrument. So when I made All-State in 8th grade, I thought, well, I'm a really hotshot, good trombonist. I want to learn another instrument. And he said, well, let me teach you about conducting and score studying. And that may sound very abstract, but when you listen to a piece of music, or when you listen to like a Beethoven symphony or Mozart's Requiem, or even piece like Ein Klein Nacht music that are for string quartet, beautiful. When the actual piece of music you're reading is a score, and because that's what the composer writes. And so being able to read that, understand that, is really the prerequisite skill for conducting. So Dad taught me just the technique of conducting, how to analyze scores, how to go through it. And so all throughout high school, I was not only getting more and more competent at trombone, but also learning about conducting. So carried that into college, and I still of course play that right now. I mentioned that because that's a really important part of my life. It shapes how I view the world. I think Dad made this point to me growing up. He was also a great trombonist too, I should point out. So to be a really good professional musician, and I was an all-state trombonist. I eventually competed and got into the all-national band. Senior year of high school, I was actually the principal trombonist for the all-national band. And so it's very competitive, and it's kind of thrilling because everyone respects each other, everyone's artistic, but it's definitely like, everyone wants to be the first chair. You don't want to settle for second. So there's a very positive competitive spirit in a lot of these domains. But to really do well that, you have to not only be very disciplined. And so I think of that, kind of as left brain, more analytical, more willpower, more conscientious functions. You also have to be very intellectual, very creative, because when you play a piece of music, you have to think about what you're trying to evoke to the audience. It's very much, there are people who can play a piece of music and play it technically well, but if you don't have any sense of awareness on maybe if you're playing a Baroque piece, you want to make sure you're using the correct ornamentations of that period. If you're playing a romantic piece, you may want to use more swells. You may want to be more sweeping and expressive when you play. And so, or you may want to put your own personal style to the piece you're playing. I think you have to have some vision of what you're trying to communicate to the audience. So that really, and I say that because that really shaped a lot of how I view things. And even through university, I really clung to that identity, for lack of better terms. It really was, at Warton, there's a lot of great people who are brilliant, who have a lot of different areas of expertise, but when you want to stick to what makes you stand out. And I really think when I look at the world, the worldview I have is actually shaped more often than I care to admit by music. I love other things. I love science. I love, I love the bottom word here, capitalism. Making money is great, but jokes aside, I have a lot of different endeavors, and I think music was really the thing that allowed me to sort of try and form the foundation for becoming, or striving to become, a Renaissance man in different categories. I think that was a great part of my life. So there we go. That's, y'all learned about Lance's musical journey.
No, I think that's really interesting. I don't know that we've had somebody who was a very passionate musician yet on the podcast, but I grew up playing music as well. Not well. I'm not good at it. But they do say it's so important for children to be exposed to understanding kind of how music works, and it helps to build your brain and your neurons in a different way than if you're not exposed to, reading music and playing an instrument and kind of making all those connections and stuff. So that's very interesting. Yeah.
I'm a big believer in music education, not only for the fact that I myself am a product of, not only learning the band tradition from my father's side, but even I should clarify, my dad comes from band world, but he also made sure the first piece I score studied was Mars, the Bringer of War by Holtz, and eventually, of course, the whole Planet Suite's Jupiter, the Bringer of Jollity, that other section of the suite. So, it brings a smile to my face, because it also not only, frankly, was how I developed as a young man, but also it was great, precious, and valuable time with my dad. And I love my dad, and of course, and everyone who knows me knows that I'm really proud to be his son, and he's often very kind to say the same. But I really was given a great genetic lottery when it comes to my family. So I'm glad we talk about this. Actually, usually I talk about, I'm asked about local governance and taxpayers association or economic development or professional stuff, but I really enjoyed talking about this, actually. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you for sharing. I think one of the things that I really love about being able to sit down and have conversations like this is that people are really multifaceted.
Yes.
Nobody is just the job that they're currently doing. Nobody is just where they're from. Nobody is just their political party. Everybody has a lot of different layers that make them up as a human. And I think being able to appreciate each other as humans is what's going to help us all continue to move forward, right?
Yeah.
On some level.
I couldn't agree more. I think, if anyone's watching, I'm sure they can see the tie. They can probably imagine I'm very patriotic, but I think America is so different from the history of every other country in the world, because most countries are founded off of some sort of common bonding of people, or maybe there's a common religious belief, or maybe there's a common geographic region that people really feel an affinity to. But America is really founded on a set of ideas, and I think the ultimate idea, if you take the rights that we believe are self-evident, that was discussed in our Declaration of Independence, you have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What all those are really aiming towards is a country where every individual can have a sense of self-determinism over their life. That is it.
Are we the first country that was founded on the principle that the people should govern themselves versus that someone better than the people should govern them?
I think, I would put a slight spin on this, but I do agree. I think there were other societies that tried to get there. Greece, Rome, but they all ended. Greece in one case ended in subversion by, of course, the Roman Empire. Rome ended by, of course, Caesar. So, they tried, but I think we're the first society that got it right of balancing. We the people are the ultimate enumerators of government, but the rights that we have are self-evident from our creator. I think that's a really important distinction. If we get the balance of there is something higher, there is something greater. We respect, of course, all religions, but the tradition of America is Judeo-Christian, and I think that's beautiful because on one hand, our government is set up to be representative. It's not set to be a direct democracy. It's set to be a representative democracy. So it is the will of the people.
Technically, a republic.
I would even go, yes, a republic representative democracy. You're correct on that. I think that is different from, definitely different from Greece, which was direct. But I think that balance is really important and really unique to us. The other democracies that follow, or you could say republics, democracies that tried to follow from America, you think of Europe, are really interesting because technically and legally, a lot of them are still monarchies.
Yep.
But
if you read the fine print,
Yep.
it's not as samesies as people like to make it out to be.
Exactly. If King Charles Britain dissolved Parliament, obviously that would cause a national tragedy or national unrest, rightly so, because Britain is in practice run by its parliament and by its prime minister. But the funny thing is there would actually be nothing legally wrong with that. Actually, I'm going to link that. The motto of my university, University of Pennsylvania, was founded by Ben Franklin, and it's Leges sine moribus venae, which means laws without morals are useless. So just because that's a good example, just because that may be legally allowed, it doesn't mean that it's morally correct. And so I think America really has a great tradition of balancing a constitution that provides clear separation of powers with these underlying principles that are self-evident and that are morally true and that are our North Star.
Yeah. Well, I feel like if this podcast gets to a larger number of people, we're going to get some comments about how perhaps it doesn't feel like a democracy anymore, or this guy or that guy is trying to be Caesar or something like that. I do think what you were kind of touching on in terms of a country needs to have morals, because a lot of the spirit of the law, right, is referenced a lot in court cases and things like that, right? So, but the spirit of the law, the interpretation of law, or what most people would commonly assume is the correct way to leverage the law, is based on a group's culture. And I think I would love to get into this more later, but just not to take up your talking time. I was thinking the other day about how it seems like we are having this really big cultural battle a lot of times in America. But if you look back over history, every generation wants to figure it out for themselves, right? Every new up and coming generation doesn't want to do things just because their parents said, look, we figured it out, do it this way, right? And then now every single person who's trying to figure it out on their own has social media, has a voice. The democratization of conversation has reached an all-time high. And so I think, to me, when people are maybe getting a little bit frustrated or angsty or, a little concerned about the direction of society, my personal perspective is that we're living the same cycle that throughout history every other people group has lived in a Western society. Mm-hmm. We just have social media, so we have to hear about it and read about it constantly every minute of the day.
If I could like a video of Morgan just saying that like 50,000 times, I would, because I think that is exactly the current situation. Don't want to get my dad in trouble for this, but my dad often likes to say that, it's in one sense great that we have the fact that anyone can have a voice. You have a Facebook profile, you are on X now. I still think of it as Twitter, but it's X now. Instagram. And that's great because it allows everyone access. But I think, there's that quote, and I don't know exactly where it comes from, but it's often used in pop culture. With great power comes great responsibility. And I think that's actually the issue. I think that the biggest issue to me is that we are in many ways the land of milk and honey. I don't mean that to say that everyone all the time is going through a great time. There's many people who are struggling in our community across the country, but I do think that a challenge that we have is that if you have the ability to do something, you should treat it like a responsibility. And so if you have a social media account, before you, and I'm guilty of this too, before you make that comment, before you make that post, before you question
This is a PSA, everybody.
It is a PSA.
We're preaching to ourselves as well as everyone else. Yes.
Exactly. No, and I agree with that. I think people would be best to, I think the easiest thing to do is stop and say, would I say this to a real person in real life? Or even better, would I say this before 100 people in a crowd in real life? And I think if the answer is yes, you would, go for it. But if the answer is no, I wouldn't, I like my comments, I like my Facebook committee friends who think the same thing as me, who think everything is going wrong with the world, then maybe don't do it. Even there's, and I think that's what gives rise to all this misinformation. But I actually really think that we often are a bit hard on ourselves, because I think a lot of the problems on social media stem from these automated bots. I mean, it's I think a huge percent of activity on these platforms isn't real humans. And so that kind of tells you that there's people manipulated, and people, whether it's companies, whether it's political actors, whether it's individuals who are, using it as a tool to kind of get ideas. The other thing is, I think, and this, I feel bad, I'm taking over when this is your expertise, but social media rewards things that hit at at the fact that we are really sensitive to dopamine. Mm-hmm. And so something that is interesting, even if it's not good, or even if it's untrue, actually, but if it's interesting and if it's salient, that's going to get promoted more than, let's say, you and I having a cogent conversation on something real. So I'll admit, I try not to spend much time on social media. I do, of course, have a lot of dear friends I send, as my generation would call memes to people. but even then, I'll fully admit this. I feel sometimes like I don't get a lot of the lingo or the norms in my generation, is because I think, in no derision to anyone else, I think a lot of people, let's just say call it millennial younger, a lot of their lives are online. I think for the elder audience listening in, most of your life you would probably realize is not social media. There's a part of your day where you go on these platforms. A lot of the people younger than you, their entire life is these, I have it in my pocket, these phones, these laptops. And so that's a huge anthropological shift too, if we just think about how our species, how our country, how our species behaves. But I'm talking a lot about social media, and we have an expert right here, so I feel kind of bad.
No, that's okay. Talking about kind of how technology and tools shape our society, to me, is always very interesting, because I think my perspective has always been that everything is a double-edged sword. Every tool is a double-edged sword. It can be used for good things. It can be used for not good things. And it's only as powerful one way or the other as the person wielding it. So I think kind of in between what you were saying, the ability for people to have a moment to critically think about things, to kind of assess what they're really trying to do with or without, social media commentary and things like that. I think there's just not a lot of space in people's lives anymore. I've kind of been bumping up against that a lot recently, that there's always one more thing you can go to, one more thing you can read, one more thing you can watch, one more thing you can, try or consume in some way. And, as you said, from a anthropological standpoint, that's very new. Life used to be a lot more simple. You had your one job, and, even further back, you were hunting and gathering food, or you were farming, or, and when it was dark and the lights went out, that was kind of a good end to the day. A lot of people would stop working. It was kind of socially acceptable to be done and take a break. There's like no time for it to be socially acceptable to take a break anymore.
That's valid.
Or maybe that's just me.
Yeah, no, I get it. That's interesting. Okay, so I have a question because you would know the answer more than I do. Do you think that what you just described is a common aching, as in people think that when you look at their lives, that whether it is work, whether it is social media, whether it's the FOMO, as I've heard, fear of missing out, do you think that is a driving factor in why people are, while materially everything is great? I mean, you look at every statistic ever, we're in the greatest era of our economy. We're at the highest level of GDP. There was inflation higher more a few years ago than it is now, but a lot of metrics would seem to say that everything is great, but a lot of people don't feel like it's great. That's sort of one of the behavioral challenges we're coming across. And you and I are not naive to why that is. I'm sort of posing this hypothetically. Do you think that the fact that there is this like obsession with filling up your calendar, or do you think that's what's driving a lot of this?
Um, yes and no. I think in general, as a society,
Yeah.
what I've kind of been talking about this last week is we live in a swipeable economy
Yes.
for everything, whether that's your relationship, whether that is your shopping choices, whether that is your restaurant choices, your friend groups, your churches, your jobs, even depending on what type of industry you're in. And the younger you are, I think the more your brain has been wired to think that way. So it's harder for your brain, through no fault of theirs, it's harder the younger you are, I think, to commit to something and really invest in something at a deeper level, because your brain has been trained to think there's something else around the corner, either that I have to do, that I have to check out, that could be better than this, you know? So at what point does your brain get to kind of rest and really invest in something? And I think that can start to hurt the overall economy from a marketing standpoint when you're promoting products or restaurants or jobs or whatever it is. If people are kind of always looking for the next thing, they're less committed to certain brands or to certain spots or places. And that might also have something to do with, I don't know. I'm not the economist, but
No, please. This is actually, this is really interesting to me. I'm serious.
well, I was trying to figure out, one of the questions I wanted to ask you is that, like you said, the metrics all show that everything is on the up, but a lot of people are feeling still the pinch in their wallets. So does that come back to inflation? Does that come back to we're still in an era where people are not spending as much, like from the top down, because they're kind of holding back because tariffs or because COVID or because, you know, things have been shifting and changing, or, you know, we're still kind of post-election, or, you know, why does it not seem like people are able to ask for more money at work, or people are maybe not spending what they would at local stores and things like that? Do you have you thought anything about any of that? Yeah.
Well, the simple and dirty answer is that so a lot of people I find who will, especially economists, who will argue that things are going well across the board and that it's that sentiment is fake. I think they're incorrect, because a lot of things in life have gotten much more efficient and cheaper. And the very easy example is that all of us will know is the difference between what cable used to cost versus a streaming service, right? But let's be honest, none of us wake up in our morning and are most proud of or most passionate about what streaming service we use. It's a part of our life. But let's look at the things that are actually really important. Housing, tuition, because the stats, but I don't think this is an optimal state for our economy. I think we need to really uplift non-collegiate tracks. But for someone who wants to go to college because they may think that that's the path to prosperity, that's much more expensive. Interesting enough, until recently, this wasn't a problem, but the COVID pandemic really exacerbated this. And look, I have many thoughts on this. I'm not trying to just deride them, but I think with the situation with global trade, not only tariffs, but with supply chain disruptions, you're seeing sometimes even food now sustainably be more expensive. It used to be just like there was a momentary hiccup in the price of eggs, but now it's kind of continuing to rise. So I really think the problem is that the luxuries of society are getting much more convenient and easy and material and efficient and cheaper. but the necessities of life are getting more expensive. And it's funny because on one hand, and this is what I challenge myself to think about, my default belief is that, well, that's simply because people are demanding that more. People are demanding housing. But I think that's actually, I kind of challenge myself. And when I think about an issue, I try to like make 100 different individuals in my head. 100's probably too much, but maybe a dozen or so individuals in my head, kind of give those individuals different viewpoints and have them battle it out. So I challenged my notion on this, and I actually listened
It
to
feels stressful inside your head.
No, actually, no, it really
The internal debate.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Like if and just to be clear, I don't, I'm not just like working and I suddenly spaz out and think this. It's more like if I'm deliberately trying to solve a problem, that's how I'll ruminate through it. But I have to give, and he's going to hold this over me, but one of my good friends, Andrew, I actually have been more convinced that he's right on housing, for instance. Housing is really a supply issue. So even if people are demanding these necessities in life more, are we really allowing there to be an optimal, natural free market flow of supply? Well, that depends on, let's just take housing as an example. Is your local state or your local city being reasonable on their building requirements, right? Because if you have very arbitrary building requirements, or heck, even if you have very lax building requirements, but your permitting department in your local county government or school government or city government is inefficient, that could hold it up. I'm certainly not talking about our area.
We're not talking about
No,
anyone
course
specific
Of
at
course
all whatsoever.
Not at all. Not at all. No, it's okay. I there's been progress in our area, but there still needs to be a lot more. But I think nationally, that's the reason why we're going through these pains. It's that the necessities of life are becoming much more harder to attain, but the luxuries of life are much more easier. You mentioned dating. We did this thing in college that was sort of like an event that was funny, but meant to be genuine. So the COVID pandemic happened right in the middle of when I was at college. So some of us,
really?
yes, it
Oh my goodness! Wow.
yes,
Okay.
it was not fun.
Brutal.
But in order to amend to that, there was this sort of fun project called the Penn Marriage Pact. And so what you would do is everyone willingly would fill out these like very lengthy applications.
Important.
I want to make that, yeah, it wasn't a mandated, it was not a mandated student program. I think someone listening could have forgotten me. But what we did was, it was just people could fill out these long forms and answer a lot of questions, like deep personal value questions. The data was anonymized. There was no way to sort of link a person to each other before it went in the system, and then the responses would get matched to someone. And so unlike just in general on social media, you were just given one match. So you had to choose to go meet that person in person versus, as you mentioned, kind of swipe on different individuals. And what we were surprised by was we thought this would just be a fun way to sort of get people out. We actually didn't really envision it for romance. It was more like, let's just get people socializing again. Half the campus signed up.
Really?
And in that process, in order to do this program, because Marriage Pact was done nationally, we had to learn about how all the different like dating app algorithms worked. And I think similar to social media, they're all driven to keep people on the platforms. And so just intuitively, is that really the best way? And I think of this for social media too. I'm not harping on the dating apps. It is the way that you want to form your most deepest life connections, whether it's your friends, whether it's your wife, whether it's your husband, really over a screen, or is it over, a more inspiring, interesting story? And I think doesn't mean you can't find great people. I've met great friends on social media, obviously same with the relationships, but I think we are gotten to a point in society where we commoditize things that should not be commoditized. But that's not on our economic structure. This is where I often say this. That's not on the way the economy is structured. That's on us as a society choosing what is an appropriate social moray or social norm to accept. So I think that's the real issue. Necessities are getting harder to attain. Luxuries are getting easier. And is that good or bad? We'll see. But I think that's certainly the situation as it stands.
That's so interesting to think about, because that kind of does go back to, I saw a post today talking about the blue collar boom, the blue collar boom that people are anticipating, right? And so to your point, there's fewer farmers,
Yes.
There's fewer electricians and trades people working and things like that. But there is so much technology and technology, as you said, is becoming easier and easier to produce, and AI is making it easier and easier to produce. So are we just maybe caught in the middle of kind of society's shift in kind of career paths that will support a family and 2-car household and white picket fence and all of that, do you think? Or, for the people who are still kind of searching after the American dream, what direction are they supposed to be heading?
Well, I'll admit this, at my own risk, I'm probably not the best person to ask about that, simply because, I'm not saying this is not a boost nor a diss to myself. I have very particular ambitions that are crazy to some extent. I mean, I want to build incredible technologies. I really I think a lot about the same kind of stuff that, and I'm not comparing myself to him because he's obviously has a lifetime of achievement, but I think about the same type of stuff that like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel is thinking about, just all these massive civilization level questions. So I say that because I think a better person to answer that question would be someone who wants to attain the white picket fence American dream and live a good life in their community. I want to do those things, but I also have these ambitions to do so many other things too, which doesn't, this is the problem. I think I see a lot of other people who I think have a lot of visionaries. If you're a visionary, if you're trying to do things that are really big, that doesn't make you better, smarter than anyone else. I think that's something that I see a lot in Silicon Valley and startup culture. And I don't think it's right. I think it makes you different from other people. So I'm different from a lot of other people, but so I think there'd be better people to ask that second part of your question too. But I can't answer the first part of your question about the rise in blue collar occupations in as more reliable than, let's just say, the traditional white collar admissions. And that's because in the story here, I serve on our county's economic development council, and we are going through a pretty unprecedented economic development strategic action plan where by the end of this year we will vote on this document that is going to set targets for what target industries we bring here, what are the best catalyst projects, and really just different changes to county code and the general progression of the region over the next 10 years. And it's not a mandate from the government, to be very clear. It is a set of targets, is it to guide what the government does. It's not a set of targets to guide what our people do and our citizens do. But that's been a very interesting process. I bring that up because
That's a citizen committee, right? No.
Well, yes and no. So the county discipline, our county commission has boards that carry out different functions that report to it. One of the most well-known was the Planning and Zoning Commission. One of the other ones that's well-known is the Children's Services Advisory Committee. One of those is also the Economic Development Council. There are representatives from the city, from every city. There's at least one city council member from each city who sits on there. There's industry representatives. There are 3 positions that are appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, members at large, and I serve in one of those capacities. So it's a great committee. And actually some of the guests that you've had on this show are a part of this. I only bring this up because
I only like to bring on the best, Lance. That's why you're here.
Only the best. Well, I'm a deviation for the new office.
No,
I'm kidding. But I don't bring it up to talk about me or what I do. I bring it up because we are actually going through this exact tension point of which industries, which jobs do we want to bring here. That's been part of the public discussions we've had. And one of my mentors, who I got to give a lot of credit to, I won't say who he is on air. He's given me some good advice that I think more people should listen to, which is that, everyone wants to, on paper and in public, say that they're helping both white collar jobs and blue collar jobs, but we need to really always just understand the amount of gratitude we all need to have for our electricians, our plumbers. We're in Florida, when hurricanes come in, those are the people who are out there making sure all of society functions. And I think
linemen, the first responders,
Yes.
The city landscaping, parks and rec that takes care of all the trees and things like that. Yeah, no.
It goes on and
We would cease to function without them.
It'd be terrible. And so one of the things that he made clear to me was, you cannot forget, and you cannot just think of that part of this population as a comma. You have to prioritize them as well as the fancy aerospace and the fancy finance jobs. And so your question to me is something that we've been wrestling with. Wrestling with. I think that we're going to see a resurgence in welders, especially here in the aerospace, near the Space Coast. I definitely think we're going to see a continued need for linemen, for electricians in particular. I think those are really, really important careers, and there's many more. I think primarily because all of the AI innovation that we see is going to have to depend upon these data centers and on these energy sources. And so if you can put yourself in an industry that is building the hardware behind that these technologies need to function, I think that's where the opportunity is.
Yes. You can be a part of the infrastructure. We really, really need that in the next, what do you think, for another 10 years or so?
Well, that's the kicker. I think it's a 10-year window, because I think in 10 more years, automation is a word that's used way too much. I think robotics in particular are going to get to the point where AI is right now. And I actually think that's going to be the jumping off point for this area's second revitalization, because the aerospace industry is like, what aerospace fundamentally is take the most complicated engineering designs for vehicles that have no practicality in daily life, that have immense practicality in these extremely important functions, and keep innovating them. Well, in order to do that, it's a capital intensive industry. You need a lot of moving hands, a lot of moving parts. You can't just write the best software to just do it with current existing technologies. You have to link that with some type of hardware structure that's able to work as fast and do as much as a system as these AI models are able to do on software. So I think the next wave is going to be the robotic innovation, and I think that will allow us to do some really cool things. But I don't mean to dominate or this part. Your question on the blue collar really stemmed a couple of memories of that. We really got to make sure that we're not just thinking about the glamorous industries. We have to make sure that we're actually serving all of our fellow citizens who are doing things that we should really think about more.
Absolutely. No, I think it's important to talk about, and it's top of my mind. We work with a fair amount of kind of the younger population, as well as the older population here in our community. So I always am kind of thinking about, what is that next generation doing, and then unfortunately you go to a lot of kind of public forums and you hear a lot of people bemoaning the state of things, and you kind of walk away thinking like, oh gosh, maybe there is no hope for, humanity and society. So it's to me, it's so important to just like, let's keep talking about it. Humans are survivalists at our core, right? We survived COVID, we've survived world wars, we've survived a lot of things. And so if we're in a crunch period economically, we can figure it out if we keep talking about it, I think, personally. All right. So shifting gears slightly.
Okay.
You went to Warton, you said. And did you have a senior thesis project of some kind? What do they have there? Probably something cooler than a senior thesis.
So, well, I don't want to...
What's bigger than a capstone? A summit project?
If they get a hold of this interview, they're going to probably call their senior thing a summit now. But no, I'm kidding. I love
a pitch home project.
No, it was. I have to say, it was a great experience, and it was phenomenal. I did have a capstone. Mine was a class it was called Advanced Private Equity. So what that was basically for 4 months, we were part of a private equity firm. This actual firm in New York came down, and they had three of their three actual clients they were trying to that they had just finished the deal of acquiring, and it was now how do we get them operating at a more efficient pace. One was and I probably shouldn't say which ones they are because they shared all of their confidential information with this class of 21 and 22-year-olds.
Nobody looked that up.
Exactly. But it was an up and coming Mexican themed restaurant in the Northeast. I want to say, think like, no insult to Chili's. Think like a perfect mix between 50% like Ocean Grill and 50% Chili's. As weird as that would sound, I'm thinking for our Vero Beach folks.
And this is too late for Chipotle, right?
Oh yeah. It's too good. So it was that was one company. One was a very prominent bakery chain that had just emerged in New York City, and then one was a real estate holding firm that did that was kind of trying to buy. They were trying to buy up like grid infrastructure which honestly probably is a really good bet given what's happened in the last few years. But I wasn't a part of that. I was part of the Mexican themed restaurant. So that was the capstone where we just were part of that private equity firm. They would come each week and we'd have assignments, and basically the assignments were like you were actually an analyst at this company. So that was really incredible. But I did actually do something that you could think of like a thesis. My sophomore year, I was a part of an independent research project that the school puts on. They take 10 students, and you essentially, the idea is that you're trying to do the work kind of like a professor does in research, where you have you create research, you publish research, there's a professor who's guiding you, but it's not that you're helping the professor with their research as an assistant, it's that you have to actually produce research, they have to review it. And so I actually have published research, and so let me think of the title. The macroeconomic implications of replacing the U.S. federal tax system with a value-added tax. So what I was trying to find was, if you took all the taxes that you and I love to pay in April.
You lovingly
or actually more like January, but the deadline is April.
I may or may not pay mine in October. It's fine.
No, it's okay. Local. I'm trying to think. Local is state. It's October, November's best, but I'm thinking federal. So, but we did So if you took the income tax, payroll tax, capital gains tax, corporate income tax, all the lovely stuff we have to go through, and just did away with it and replaced all of it with a VAT. What would that be like? So saying whether
what is a VAT to the kids at home?
It's like it's like the grown-up version of a sales tax, in that a sales tax you pay when you go get your coffee or when you go buy anything. A VAT is a tax on all layers of the supply chain. So let's take a coffee. Coffee bean goes to, I assume, a distributor. I don't really know how the coffee business works, but let's just assume for the sake of it. Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is that every time value is added,
yes, it gets taxed.
In the pipeline, it gets taxed.
Yes.
Which is already happening.
Yes, but
basically every time something changes hands, there's a tax.
Yes, but the thing that is invisible is a lot of goods in the U.S. are intermediate goods and not subject to a sales tax. So what a VAT would do, and sales tax are usually at a state level. So the federal government has some like trade or excise taxes. They're insignificant though as a percent of the total revenue that it raises for the government. So what we found was that if you replaced the entire federal tax system with a VAT is basically the most efficient type of consumption tax. So
efficient for who?
Efficient in that it doesn't make any distortion on if you're a business owner choosing between theoretically capital or labor. It doesn't distort your choice. Whereas most other taxes will impact and incentivize you to make decisions based off of what the thing is being taxed versus what you think as the business owner or as the consumer is the most efficient. The benefit of that is a leaner economy, greater capital stock, which means the accumulated amount of assets that can be turned into something productive. That's what capital stock would refer to. So the results were basically, if you do that, you would get higher economic growth. I'm simplifying it because no one wants to talk about VATs, but it was a very interesting process because I had to read like 50, not 50 books. I probably about 15 or so books on like really dense economic research, and then probably another 30 other papers. Because when you're doing something like that, you have to like take a lot of information from a lot of different sources, and kind of.
Did they make you really read them because you didn't have ChatGPT back then?
Let me clarify. This was actually not part of a course. This was actually during a summer. So I got paid by the school to conduct research. This is published on This is all published on Penn's website. You can probably find it if you were to
dig deep enough.
Yep, I'm sure. I'd be happy to provide it, but I don't think anyone wants to. I think the bourbon's more interesting than that, but it was fun.
I know. I'm going to go look it up. Maybe we'll link it in the description for people.
Oh my gosh.
If anybody gets really bored, you can go check it out.
That's that research.
I think finding better solutions to funding the government while also empowering people's ability to make money is always a worthy discussion.
Yeah.
I spend a decent amount of time thinking about it, and I don't even have the type of business where I have to pay a lot of different types of taxes, But I mean, I'm just very pro the business owners, right? I think if you you are a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a consultant
Yeah.
of any kind, you are kind of taking a risk on yourself. And I think that if those people don't do it, then there's not jobs and economic growth for other people. So they should be rewarded. So if there's a way to make their lives easier and there's less juggling of taxes and tracking and finances and systems and all that type of stuff, I think that's always really worth delving into.
I would, what I'm about to say is not necessarily the research, because again, research should be neutral, it should be objective, it should be fact-based, but doing that definitely informed the belief that I'm about to articulate, which is that if we were to strive for eliminating, let's just say, the income tax or the corporate income tax, or even be hard to do, but even like the payroll tax, and replace it with a VAT or a similar type of consumption tax, I like that simply because I think we manage to tax every conceivable way that someone produces something for the economy.
Right.
Even if you have assets or wealth and you literally just invest it, whether it's in a new business, whether it's in a local business, whether it's in the stock market, you're still taxed on that in capital gains. I mean, there's no way of doing anything productive for the U.S. economy that is not taxed. And yet it's only really in state and local levels where consumption is taxed. And I think it would make more sense to tax what people consume or take out of the economy more than what they produce into it, because essentially it is an incentive against production. Obviously, no one's going to not start a business or not, but it would just make more sense to incentivize.
It's nice to remove barriers to entry when you can,
of course,
right?
Exactly.
Especially when one would perhaps argue that the, economic lifestyle of the majority of Americans is not as at its strongest, right?
Completely agree.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yes.
Speaking of fun tax things.
Oh no. More tax.
No, now you've got me going. This is my little inner economist who knows nothing about economics. This is my dream conversation.
Oh,
but
great. Love that.
The doing away with of property taxes in the state of Florida. He's taking a really long sip, you guys.
Thank you for the issue that I'm being most grilled upon in the last month. But
well, if everyone else was asking you about it, we don't have to talk about it here. But
no, I'm joking. This is I love talking about this kind of stuff. I'm being humorous.
So maybe just give people a quick synopsis of what's being discussed at its state level, right? And what are your thoughts as someone with kind of an economic background?
Sure. Disclaimer, this is not the official stance of the Taxpayers Association, because I know that will come back to me.
We haven't even discussed the fact that you are the head, the founder, the arbiter of the Taxpayers Association.
I am not the founder. That is actually your former building. I don't know how we described it, what Walter Buckingham founded it, but people are like really confused at this point now.
Oh, I've never met Mr. Buckingham, but
he's dead. Oh my God. He the building the Buckingham Wheeler building.
Yes, no, that's fair. Gene Waddell.
Yes.
To me was the okay. So anyway,
you're asking me a question. I deviated. I'm sorry. Now I really am.
That really went sideways.
Now I probably seem like a politician to the viewers. I mean, my goodness.
Stop dodging the questions.
I won't dodge it.
I wore my best Barbara Walters outfit to try and pinhole you into. You were discussing property tax.
Sure.
In Florida, perhaps being done away with.
Sure. So a couple important pieces of background, because the background is political in some sense, in that different factions, different schools of thought kind of led to the current discourse. So first thing to understand is that in Florida, the state government is funded primarily by sales tax. Local governments are funded, 70% of local government funding comes from property taxes. So it's
in
important.
Florida.
Yes, in Florida. Yes, all in Florida. But Florida, can be a good microcosm for other states, but this is just the system in Florida. So intuitively, if you're going to eliminate property taxes, the commensurate level of revenue you're going to need it's going to affect essentially your local governments. Meaning local governments are going to have to find new avenues for revenue if this hypothetical expulsion of property taxes were enacted. My fear, and also, so the past legislative cycle, there was a very prominent, this is all public, discourse is the nicest way of putting it, between the Florida Speaker, House Speaker, the Florida Senate President, and the governor. They all had different thoughts on this matter, and some of it was disagreements that were just who is more in charge, but some of it also was genuine. And so what they've ultimately arrived at is there is a committee that is now going to study whether or not there should be a ballot referendum across the state on either eliminating or putting some type of additional homestead exemption for property tax. So what is homestead exemption? As the name would expect, if you have a home here in Florida and you have to register for homestead, you have to actually go to your property appraiser and make it happen. You can't just have your home here
They
and
don't
just
just
buy
give it to
property.
you. You have to file for it. Yes.
Exactly. That is so now that legislative committee and actually our state representative Brackett is on that committee. That was, in a sense, you could look at it like a compromise between what the governor wanted and what the speaker wanted, and that we're going to actually study this. We're going to actually do something about it. And I think, in a sense, that is actually a great resolution to public policy. There were disagreements, there were feuds. It became, let's have a committee, study this, look at this, and see what happens. If I were to predict how things would happen, and you should never do this in public because you may be wrong, I think it's going to come down to some type of homestead exemption expansion, because if you were to eliminate the property taxes, people need to understand there would still be some other way of those governments getting funded. It could be sales tax. It could be, I don't want to say it'd be a VAT, but some other tax would be imposed. So it's not like it would just go away completely. It would go away from your property taxes, but it would still exist in some
It would
form.
increase sales tax or something else. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the challenge there that we all have to look at is, well, what is an option that both gives people tax relief? Because again, I want lower taxes. Look at how I'm dressed. You can probably guess my political affiliation if we're being really honest. But I also think, I'm also a big believer in federalism and in the constitutional principle that, you have layers of government. You have your federal government, you have your state government, and you have your local government. Your local governments are what are most close to the ground. And so if a locality has their autonomy to basically conduct its basic business infringed upon, I don't want that to be what occurs. I want there to be relief given to people, but there's still some type of situation where services can be provided. And this is, and this is important because a lot of the targeted motive of the legislature, understandably, is to go after really high tax counties who have a huge amount of waste, who are some of the highest tax counties in the state of Florida. Well, our county, love them or hate them, is one of the more fiscally conservative counties. So should the more fiscally conservative
We run
counties...
a fairly lean budget overall. I've looked at it. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so do we want a situation where all across Florida, all the fiscally conservative counties are now punished because of the non-fiscally conservative counties? It's tough to hash out, which is why I think the most reasonable conclusion will probably be some type of ballot expansion of homestead exemption. It could be the case that there's a ballot initiative to eliminate property taxes. We'll wait and see. The governor has time. The legislative committee has time. We're kind of too early in the process to know. But my opinion is I just think we want to make sure that we provide relief, but also make sure that the basic services and the governments that are actually efficient are not punished by the governments who are inefficient and wasteful.
That's well said. If that were to appear on a ballot, when would they be looking to do that?
The conversations I've heard, both publicly and privately, are 2026. So they actually have to start pretty soon if they're going to actually put something on there. There's time, but for all the pomp and circumstance and for the making sure you get information out and for all the more...
There's a lot of
marketing,
rules about being able to do a special ballot item. Mm-hmm.
Bingo. And it's a complicated matter. But I think that what we're going to see is, and again, I want to just be clear about this. I am very supportive of the effort to find relief. I'm just cautioning everyone on, let's make sure not to do something that accidentally causes more problems. Because let's be honest, if the local property tax goes away, but now all of our fees for utilities go up, I'm just saying hypothetically by 700%, what does that accomplish? So I just think we want to be prudent in what we do here.
Right. And that's a really valid point, because for all the people who don't own property but perhaps rent, right, then even if there's relief on property tax, but as you said, other costs and fees go up, then you're kind of hurting those who might already be considered a little bit at a disadvantage because they don't own property to begin with and have less security in that way. So
Yeah, exactly.
it's a lot to kind of uncover there. Okay. On to something else.
Oh no.
Shall we?
Yes. This is funny.
Lance, do you have a day job?
Oh yes.
Okay. What is your day job?
Because everything
I don't even know, to be honest. This will be new information for me.
No, absolutely. So actually, 4 months ago, a good friend of mine in college and I, we co-founded a startup together. He's based up in Boston. I'm based here. This is annoying lingo that was coined in San Francisco probably about 5 years ago. And I don't entirely like it, but it's a good description. Called stealth mode. We are in stealth mode because what we're doing is we're designing a solution to a very important challenge that biotech and pharma companies face when they're basically doing clinical site selection. And so right now we're about 4 months into building the product out. My business partner
Are we allowed to release this on the podcast?
Yes, because I'm not going to go into exactly what it is, but hopefully actually I want to say by January, we'll be public with the company name and with the product, but it's been really fun. A lot of work behind the scenes to make that happen. Before then, what I did, so for most of the time you've known me, I would help startup founders who wanted to sell their businesses, basically advise them on how to market themselves to an acquirer and what they need to do over the next 6 to 9 months to make themselves desirable. Literally, it stemmed from, and I would start everyone with this. I mentioned that in Warton, my capstone was in private equity. So private equity firms, which are more for typically bigger companies, will typically use an LBO model, which stands for leveraged buyout, where you buy a company, use a lot of debt to buy it, and so you profit from the cash flow of that company once you have it, paying down the debt and growing in earnings, and then you sell it for a much higher price, a much higher premium, as you would say in the community or in the private equity community. At a much smaller level, you don't really have that. You typically have either venture capital firms or what the term is strategic acquirer. These are companies who, again, want to buy another company because that company will really add something to their company. So in these cases, I started because after university, probably about 3 months after I graduated, one of my friends who is a founder had a buddy who was incredibly brilliant, had designed an excellent solution on how to make satellites more able to basically transmit stuff in adverse weather conditions, stuff far beyond what I'm able to understand. But he didn't know anything about how to pitch his company to sell it because he wanted to go into something else. Many founders, as you know, they just want to move on to something else once they do
the inventor is not the marketer, is not the business manager. Yeah.
Exactly. So most of the time I've been down here, and again, this is a testament to the world. You can do things from anywhere in the country. And I actually fly out a lot in a lot of cases, especially in 23 and 24, which I'm really happy that Breeze is now here, but I would have been more happy if Breeze were here, 1 or 2 years ago. That's all.
Well, better late than never, right?
Exactly.
We'll take it.
Exactly. So I would say more of a day occupation because back in those days, when it was deal season, when I wasn't in between these companies, I would, and so for context, I would be a part of these enterprises, and then when they would sell, I would charge a fee of 1% for of the equity price. So for most larger firms, like if you're using an investment bank, you're going to charge 3% usually is what the bank charges. I'm obviously one person. I'm obviously young. I started out helping a friend of a founder, and that, of course, led to referrals to other founders in similar situations. I wouldn't say it's a big market, but I would say it was enough to get me to a point on a personal level where 4 months ago, I'm able to venture off and finally start something with a good friend of mine and just focus on building this really cool product. It is in biotech, which is interesting because my co-founder, he is so much more aware of that than I am. He has great experience in actually what we're doing. I'm more so there to help on the operation side and on business strategy is a term that is coined out too often, but just understanding how to basically draw this out over the long term. What we're really going to try to build, and we're both pretty open about this, is a type of company where there was a term that was used 100 years ago that's not as much used now called vertical integration. It's what Rockefeller and Carnegie did. It's basically instead of...
People still use that now.
Really? No, because I'm serious.
You're hilarious.
No, I'm so serious here. When it comes to like anyone I've met under like not under 30 general, but in Silicon Valley, like they're also focused on like making their little thing and just trying to pitch how valuable it is. They're not trying to take over all parts of the supply chain. So that's what I mean. So maybe, but if I think it's a very effective business model, I think more people should use it. Long
You should
term.
watch more of my podcasts. There's a few people who kind of have prioritized that in their business model and kind of their long-term strategy. Mm-hmm.
And that's the long-term plays. We want to get to a point where we can just basically create any type of solution in the biotech space possible. So if we want to cure an intractable disease, we can do it. Now, this is like a 10, 20-year ambition. We're trying to solve a very specific problem right now that is valuable to mainly biotech and pharma companies that use multinational consulting firms like McKinsey or Bain or BCG. But when we get to a point where we solve that problem, we can then hopefully just innovate more and more across the supply chain to where, like, from conceptualizing a drug or a solution or a treatment to a disease, we can get to a point where we can not only design it, but we can manufacture it and we can sell it and we can distribute it. Because you don't really see that today in that space. So that's, and mostly why we wanted to work on that is because I think it's a really interesting problem to solve. And I'm kind of wired that way. I like to solve challenging, difficult things and work with people who are doing that. I'm known for you mentioned this Taxpayers Association, the groups I'm on here. That's more just civic service to the community. It's an important part of my life. I think you should give back. I think if you're proud of your country, you need to do so. But weirdly enough, to your point, I don't think many people know about that. Partly because I don't like to really advertise it. I do like privacy, but I mean, anyone who knows me knows I'm open about that. My board members, Joanne Barnhart, Jeff Palesci, you know them. They know it. But I don't advertise it because I think everyone's so focused on promoting themselves and what they do, and I more so just like to focus on what I'm doing, do the work, get it done, and just
you just want to do it.
Yeah, literally, yeah.
Let the work speak for itself.
My mentor, I don't mean to hound on this so much. My mentor asked me a question when we went to the Vero Beach Country Club, actually, probably about not 2 years ago, it was shorter than 2 years ago. Probably, oh wow, no. Okay, close to years ago. It was before I was taxpayers president. August of 23. Yeah, I remember this because it was her and one of her relatives. And she put this hypothetical. She said, okay, in one door, you are the most well-known CEO of a Fortune 500 company or the president of the United States. And like you have one or two things that you really want to change in the world that you've accomplished. Or door number two, everything you want to change and everything you want to accomplish, you can look back on your life and say that you've done it, but very few people know who you are. You don't have any of the status or accoutrements. I will go down door number two every time because I want to design. I'm kind of like I view myself kind of through the lens of like an architect. I like to design and build things. And obviously I'm not an architect. I'm not claiming to be an architect.
No, respect to the architect.
Yes, respect
Absolutely.
to the architect. But that's just how I am. And I find joy in creating, building, designing solutions to anything that humanity is going through. I know that sounds grand and grandiose to some extent, but that's what I like to do. And so that's why I try to surround myself with people who are more analytical, more focused, more here and now, because that's a great partnership. Because if I was just doing all of that and this, then I wouldn't be a mess, but I certainly wouldn't be as effective as I am now.
No, I think that's really interesting. And that's good self-awareness too.
Yeah.
The earlier in life, you can start to kind of dissect what things you love to do and what things you're happy to let other people do around you.
Sure.
I think the better off that you can be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Look, I've talked so often. I feel bad for not asking you any questions.
No, this is my job, is to ask you the questions.
I appreciate
One day when you have a podcast, you can interview me.
There we go. We're
Okay.
going to do that. But you have notes. Oh, sorry.
I don't have notes, but
I'm curious.
everything that you were saying kind of got me thinking. I know you don't spend any time on social media, but I wanted to see if I could find this guy. I love watching his reels or TikToks. he talks a lot about kind of like startup culture.
Yep.
And kind of the vernacular and things like that. I just think is hilarious. I'm not in a ton of that kind of Silicon Valley, San Fran, whatever. I don't know. I might not be able to find it. I can show it to you after the.
I don't want to say I don't like Silicon Valley because there's so many incredible people who are doing great things, and I don't want to come off as like pouring, water on anyone's accomplishment just because it may not be in the stuff that I'm interested in. But I really like the more contrarian Silicon Valley thinkers and VC firms. I think I would even count Musk in that category because Musk focuses on things that are very capital intensive. And I think because of Wall Street's influence on Silicon Valley, in good ways in many sense, there's a focus on ROI that incentivizes sort of these less capital intensive industries. So creating a new app that is viral is a much better, easier model for that capital than, let's say, doing what Anduril is doing. Anduril is trying to revamp the U.S. industrial base for like national defense weapons manufacturing. That's a hard thing to do. They've been successful, but that took a lot of support from people who didn't do the typical thing in the Valley or in California. And so that's a good example, like an exception. I think more of those exceptions are really needed. I think really deep tech innovation is, and I know it's a buzzword, deep tech is stuff that like you have to design something that isn't already available versus just repackaging something that's existing. That's kind of the idea behind deep tech. More of that is important. That's kind of like when you think of Edison or Tesla or any of the great scientists, even across history, that's also a big love of my life too. I don't probably talk about it that often, but my first enjoyment in life, even before music, when I was like a kid, was astrophysics. I just loved reading, just more and learning about the universe and sort of the physics behind how everything was constructed and how everything relates to each other, and still do today. And I'm not an expert in it. Certainly I don't claim to be, but it's a fascination of mine to just get at what's the truth of everything. And so I'm hoping for the listener that I've bought enough time for Morgan to have the.
I did not find it, but that was good.
Okay. I was buying time. I have to admit.
I'll find it afterwards and I'll show it to you. We'll capture it on camera.
I meant everything I said, but I was buying time for more.
I did want to ask you about your favorite period in oh my gosh. Did you swallow your chair?
No, I was trying to enjoy the orange.
Oh my gosh, do not choke on the orange.
No,
I'll never hear the end of it.
No, it's okay. I enjoy like because the orange absorbs flavor. And so it's like a nice little like lollipop.
I think that's not how it's meant to be
consumed, not meant to be.
But I'm glad that you're thinking outside the box and living your best life here on the podcast.
Yep,
because you're allowed to do that here.
You'll do that. You'll do that.
I was going to ask if you have a favorite period in history.
Ooh, great question. Do I? Let's ignore the fact that no area in history had like the basic things that all of us require to live, like air conditioning or electricity. But besides that point, it is okay. I have one question.
Well, let me give you a caveat.
Okay, fair.
Let's box it a little bit differently.
Okay, good.
Rather than just a period of history that you really enjoy studying or reading about.
Okay, there we go. Because I was going to ask you if you wanted something more like, what would I enjoy?
Not like if you
could
come back and a different decade or whatever. But that you do enjoy. Yeah. And then I found it. It's hilarious.
3. I'm narrowing it down to 1 because I'm going to narrow it down to 1. I'm not going to do the.
And then on the next podcast, we can talk about that one.
Of course, we'll do number 2. Then we'll do number 3.
Part 2, yeah.
I'm going to do a time period for a geographic period. I think 1750 to 1850.
You wanted to live through the American Revolution?
No. What I find most interesting to study.
Oh, to read about. That's true.
Because
I changed the
for several reasons more.
Yes.
So I love music. My favorite era of music is that era towards the end of the classical. So in music, the classical era goes from 1750 to, some people would say 1820. Some people would say the cutoff is when Beethoven published Eroica, his 3rd symphony. There's debate.
Which was when?
1803. So a bit of a difference between 1820. But the Romantic era of music started 1820 to 1900. I like that era. Really, I'm a big Beethoven fan. I'm a huge Beethoven fan. So that late classical, early romantic period is my favorite era in music, which was in that period. Also, several really significant things happened that I think were probably, I would argue, even more significant for America and the West than even the world wars, and the biggest one being the Napoleonic Wars. You basically took 1,000 years of European history and borders and kingdoms, and Napoleon's wars and conquests essentially just blew all that up in chaos. And again, I think, that was such a change that people, for example, all of the thinkers that have affected most political ideology of today, the first person who really put those ideas out there for most ideologies grew up in a Europe post-Napoleonic Wars. And so just think about growing up in a chaos or an uncertainty, or even a certainty in your basic life, but an uncertainty in the political kingdom, wider world
Right.
that would have on you. And I think that's really telling. At the same time,
Who was that person that you're thinking of?
well, you could name several. You could look at all the German philosophers in the 1800s. You could even, if you want to do the most negative version, Karl Marx. I mean, the fact that I think where people grow up really has an effect on their worldview, and so many consequential characters, kind of cast of characters, grew up in that time right after the Napoleonic Wars. And then, of course, you can't ignore, not just because I'm patriotic, but just the complete revolution of ideas that was America being birthed in the same
The
period.
startup kids would call it a disruption.
Oh God,
They were disruptors.
I am against that term, but it is a good term for some people. No, but I like that era because I think so much happened. I think the Elvu, because here's why I like it. If I distill it into a couple sentences, many eras of history include changes in a certain thing, like governments, or in that case kingdoms, or other eras where there's maybe progress in music or art. But so many things changed across so many domains of human knowledge. You had political changes, you had, through the Napoleonic Wars, societal transformation. You had in music, again, very few people think about music history. You had the most important shift in music history really in that moment when Beethoven published his Third Symphony, changed music from being about rational expression to, what's a better way of phrasing it? From rational articulation of a concept that you want the audience to get to, into romantic expression of your feelings, your thoughts, what evokes you. That Beethoven was really the first who did
Less
this.
about storytelling, more about feeling telling.
I would say, yeah, I would almost say, though, it's more like, instead of I want you to understand the story, I want you to feel the story. I think that's what Beethoven did really well. But music, art, of course, borders were redrawn. People forget the Germany and Italy did not exist before the mid 1800s, and largely the changes that led to those states unifying was out of necessity to a repeat of a figure in the cultures. I guess the repeat of something like another country like France invading them. Napoleon was long gone by those points. Just to be clear, I'm not just saying things that aren't true, but the thought of a lot of citizens in the decades after Napoleon were, oh wow, we were conquered because we were all these small independent states. We really should, we really should consider unifying. Right. And I just think that was a period of such change and such gravitas, and we don't appreciate it because our attention spans really go back to World War II, I think, as a society. So that'd be an interesting one. There's others I could think of. I don't want to go into those.
I really appreciate that perspective, though.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. That was fun. I got to think. Yeah.
Well, maybe if you have some book recommendations, we'll drop that in the description as well.
May I?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not saying this just to say it. I really believe it. I am very... when people say this, I think sometimes they say it just to seem like they are, but anyone knows me knows that I'm very, very, very proud of my faith, and quite religious in how I view, my conduct and what I should do in the world. But I think even if you are the most hard-line atheist in the whole world, you should read the Bible, because it is the piece of text that has transformed and had the most impact on every part of the human race, even non-Christian cultures, like the effect of them dealing with countries who are in Christendom. I think that's number one. But more on what you're looking for, The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, not only because it is really the first articulation, even though capitalism existed before then, it's really the first articulation of a lot of ideas that are common in capitalism, but it's also, he uses so many historical arguments. You learn about other civilizations by reading The Wealth of Nations, just on how they operated, their currency. Genoa is referenced. A lot of middle kingdoms in Europe that no one's ever heard of a reference. If we read a book today that's historical, we get a sense of our perspective of history. If we read a book written 276, no, sorry, not 276. Oh, 249 years ago. My goodness, that was terrible of me. 249 years ago, you get a sense of what people were thinking in that time. That I like The Wealth of Nations. I really like a book by Peter Diamandis called Bold. It's probably not that well known, but here's why I like it. He interviewed Elon Musk, Larry Page, Jeff Bezos in the early to mid 2010s, before all of them were well known. Now, it wasn't about them, it was just their advice on entrepreneurship, but it's so fascinating to get their long form interview before they were well known. But it's so clear they're still the people who we know of today.
That's so fascinating.
I
What
love
is that one called?
Bold, by Peter Diamandis. And actually, I could be wrong. I think Peter Diamandis has a residence, could be wrong on this, up in the Space Coast region a bit north of us. I think, I remember there was an interview with him and Elon Musk, but he's a big advocate for pretty much the transformation of human technologies and for entrepreneurs to kind of think boldly. It was a book that really affected me as a teenager when I read it. My favorite book for a lot of reasons on a that is non-biblical is actually Paradise Lost. I think it is such a epic story, and there's so many lessons to draw from it. May I share? I don't want to take up time if it's important.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, what John Milton did in that is the protagonist. So it tells the story of the fall man, but it does it through the lens of Lucifer or Satan, and it's not trying to glorify. For anyone who hasn't read it, most people who read it know what I'm saying, but those who haven't read it, it is not a glorification of that at all. What there's a subtle message of in there is that, all of us in our lives, we like to try to empathize with or be heroes or heroines. And the hero's journey is probably the most common way of storytelling. But I think there's a lesson that I draw from that, which is the ultimate good is not to be the hero. Because if you read that book, you're reading a story through the lens where the hero is literally the incarnate of evil. The ultimate good is God. And I think that's a very good lesson that, if you don't put the false idol of trying to be the most well-known, glorious hero, put the highest good as being truly good, being as God would intend for you to be. That was a really profound lesson. And I think most analysis of Paradise Lost don't really touch on that. They focus on the numerous epical themes, because it's a really long epic poem, and there's so much more than what I'm saying, but that's the big lesson I took away from that.
That was your takeaway. Yeah.
It was really important. I could go on books, but those are good. Practical, I will say, I think 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is, people will say, well, it's just so basic. Basics work. It's a great book. It's true. I think people try to innovate on it in the self-help space. I think that's a bit redundant. It's a great book. It will really focus you on how to be professionally successful. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People is a classic. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I think those 3 are the only. I really think the whole self-help genre, not to criticize anyone, if you just read those 3 books, you'd be fine. And then I think supplement the other stuff with more interesting spiritual philosophy. And then this is going to show my nerd. I actually really enjoyed reading Newton's Principia, which is the book where he compiled everything from his laws of motion to actually calculus. And it's funny because we all learn these basic things in school these days. But to read how he created them, because you're reading the proof of how he's arguing for these ideas that are not self-evident. It's really interesting. So that's what those are probably some of the books that I most enjoy. Oh, and then for fiction, I'll leave one more and then I'll shut up. The Three Body Problem, it's actually a Chinese author and it's a Chinese novel. It was translated to English when I don't know if it was President Bush or President Obama, but it was gifted to one of our presidents as an English translation, and then they started printing it in English. But I'm a big astrophysics nerd, as I said, and I also love Star Wars, so I'll admit that to the whole world, and I love Star Wars. But that's a great novel. That's a great, the Three Body Problem is excellent. It's really excellent literature.
Okay.
Yeah, that's done. I've taken up so much time on talking about books.
No, that's really great. I hate to end it because you and I could just sit here and
I
talk all
enjoyed this
afternoon,
immensely, yes.
but at some point my poor editor needs to go home. So
likewise, I have to go to the Children's Services Advisory Committee event, which
we all have things
Yep.
to do. But anyways, thank you so much for being such a good guest. Thank you for hashing through all this stuff with us.
Love it.
If people would like to get more involved in local community endeavors,
Yeah.
or perhaps seek you out for professional services, how should they get a hold of you?
Sure. So I'm pretty simple, and I don't mind giving my email out because I think at this point it is public on our Taxpayers Association website, lunceford@comcast.net. I actually read every email I get, even if it's from folks who I'm not familiar with. So that's an easy way to do it. The Taxpayers Association, we didn't really talk about this that much, but we have a form where you can get in contact with us if you're a citizen of Indian River County who just has any comments on any issue you're facing, or thoughts on public policy. That's mostly what we do. I think many people who also listen to this probably know about the Taxpayers Association, so I don't need to mention that. But pretty much, I would say email is definitely best. I try to keep my phone number more private, but lunceford@comcast.net is a great way to reach me. And I just want to pause by saying, Morgen, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your time. And I enjoyed the old fashioned, but I also appreciate you and all that you do, not only with Beyond the Trend, but with Main Street. It's incredible to talk to someone who's also really involved and is a well-respected and passionate community leader. So thank you for the time, and I'm glad that we could do this.
That's very nice. Thank you, Lance. I think this should not be the last time. We should do this again.
Yes.
Touch base. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Please click on the links in the description. Like, follow, subscribe, share this with your friends. And if you're interested in becoming a guest or working with us on a podcast or anything else, just reach out. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.